Hey everyone! We've been hosting a special week-long celebration of education and learning here at Epic with Education Week 2020. Across our pages, enjoy spotlights on the work of educators, students, and self-taught developers around the Unreal Engine community, explore valuable teaching and learning resources to accelerate your success, learn from experts in the industry, and find guidance on developing a career in interactive 3D. Head over to the Unreal Engine feed for a one-stop shop of inspirational stories and exciting resources available to you. It's October, and that means it's time to fill up your goodie bags with new, free Unreal Engine Marketplace content. Gothic Nights, remote polar facilities, spooktacular music, and more are now available in the monthly rotation. Find your way to the Marketplace and treat yourself to the 10 free products before time runs out. While you're there, rake up unbelievable savings on over 1,000 Marketplace products, now 50% off. Find scary good deals on fall and Halloween-themed products, in addition to sound effects, modular characters, realistic VFX, and so much more. Not to scare you, but the sale ends Friday at 11:59 p.m. Eastern, so don't miss out. If you'd like to try out the latest features and updates coming to Unreal Engine, download Unreal Engine 426 Preview 2, which is now available on the Epic Games Launcher and GitHub. See the full list of changes and share your feedback with us on the Unreal Engine 426 Preview Forum thread. We're excited to announce the Unreal Engine Human-Machine Interface Initiative, debuting first in the GMC Hummer EV. Leverage Unreal Engine's powerful real-time feature set to create best-in-class HMI, infotainment, and digital cockpit experiences. Step in the driver's seat and get started today at unrealengine.com/HMI. First making headlines with its standout title Raw Data, Los Angeles-based VR pioneer Survios recently collaborated with AMC to realize their biggest title to date, The Walking Dead Onslaught. Visit the Unreal Engine feed where the team details the great lengths they went to ensure that players feel they've stepped right into an episode of the hit TV show. And over to our top weekly Karma earners, many thanks to Clockwork Ocean, Every Nun, Cheerer, Mama Marcis, Evil Cleric, Shatui, Expose, Herb64, Crewdimer, and Luna Nellis. Jumping to our spotlights, the stunning short film you see here is Pantheon. Created by Han Yang, a CG supervisor with credits on Hollywood hits like Logan, Aquaman, and Detective Pikachu. Pantheon tells the story of a battle for the power hidden in the Pantheon. Watch the full video on YouTube and visit his ArtStation for a look behind the scenes. Next up is a beautiful survival game set in feudal Japan called Lost in Red Valley. What you see here was created in 4 months of development. If you have feedback and want to follow Alex's dev journey, follow them on Twitter and join their Discord. And to cap off this week, be sure to check out Manor Lords, an upcoming medieval strategy game from Slavic Magic. Developed by a solo dev, Manor Lords combines realistic city building with large-scale tactical battles. Wishlisted on Steam today. Thanks for watching this week's news and community spotlight.
Hi everyone and welcome to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I'm your host, Victor Broden, and today I have a merry bunch of people with me who are going to help me talk about the student journey. First up, top left, we have my co-host today, I'll almost have to say that you are, Louis Cataldi, our global education evangelist. Welcome to the stream. Next, we have Alethea Garrison Stuber Weston Wong, lead producer for Rome. From SMU Guildhall, Jaime Toes, project lead for Malediction from Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy. We have Kate Baird, creative director for Excalibuts, studied at DigiPen Institute of Technology. Mary Dvorsky, co-creator of Osias from Ringling College of Art and Design. And last but not least, Milo Smiley, lead writer and producer for Ginkgo, studied at University of Southern California. All right, that was a mouthful. To kick off, today we have a little bit of a special video that I wanted to play, which is the Fall Student Sizzle Reel. And so without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and kick that off. All right. I hope that excited everyone. It's really cool to see what comes out of all of these schools and all these amazing students. All right. Without further ado, we have quite a lot to cover today. And so we're going to start off with Mary, who is going to talk a little bit about size. Do you want me to start playing the trailer?
Yeah, sure, that works.
All right. Let's go ahead and show off the trailer.
I was told this ancient story about a dragon that lives up in the mountains. So now, I want to know if the story's true. I am Osiris.
All right. And right as we're about to come back, there we go. Mary is back. Welcome back to the call.
Hi, sorry.
That was great timing.
Thanks.
It's a super impressive trailer. I'm gonna give the floor to you. This is your time to do your presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, so Joe Rodriguez is my partner, and there were only two of us making this game. We started in our junior year, spring semester, and we started with pre-production. We went into game design, which led into visual development, and then we started our prototype for the game and all of the mechanics that were going to be in it. It was a lot of fun. We took the summer to kind of like cool ourselves off after junior year, and then we came right back senior year, and we finished the game in about 8 months after that.
Wow.
It's a lot of fun. We became really close from this project as well. We worked together really well on our junior year project and just decided that our strengths really went well together, and we wanted to be thesis partners.
And out came Osiris.
Yes, he's our son. We're super proud of where this game got us. It seemed to get us a lot of exposure. We had no idea it would get this big, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
Cool. Did you want to go ahead and do your the slide deck?
Yeah,
Or sorry, the gameplay walkthrough.
sure. I'm sharing my screen for this, right?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Okay.
All right. I think we're good.
Okay. Cool. So, this is our title screen. We put a lot into every single part of our project. We want our HUD to look really good. We want our UI to look really good. We worked really hard to achieve our visual fidelity. I'm going to skip through this beginning part just to get to the gameplay. So in our game, you start off in the village area. Osiris is a young boy whose parents were killed. A nomadic tribe took him in, and they moved around from place to place. And when his parents were still alive, they told Osiris about a legend of a dragon that resided in the mountains. And after all of this time, the nomadic tribe finally came to the area where the legend supposedly began. And Ozias figures he's 14, he's old enough to go off on his own now. So when the nomadic tribe goes hunting, he sneaks off and he goes into the mountains to see if this legend is true. We did everything from visual effects to modeling, texturing, dialogue. Jo is actually the voice of our character. She did a voice mod so that her voice sounded kind of deeper, kind of like a young boy would sound. And we also incorporated a lot of cinematics in our game. We wanted our story to really show and be a big part of our gameplay. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was crazy though. Jo actually worked on our character, and every time his scarf moves, she actually did that. That's not something that is just kind of happened. She did it in the blueprints, which Unreal has, which are awesome. You can kind of see like her character wheel right there with all of the animations she did. He backs up and he like turns around when he backs up. For his jump, he crouches and then he like springs into the air. She had to do all of that. She went into the animation depot and put all of these animations together. It was crazy. And I'm not very good at animation, so I was so thankful that she was. So she did the mechanic where he jumps. So the crouch that you'll see soon, she worked on. And then I decided to do the particles for it. So I did the VFX for the wings. And for that, I actually had to go into Maya and like rig the wing system. I had to like model them and then rig them. And then we took them into the blueprints. That's actually where we incorporated them. If you see that right there, crazy blueprints. But so we did a lot of collab on everything. There's my wings. A lot of fun. And our HUD system she worked on. But yeah, there was two of us, and it was a lot of work. But we had a lot of late lab nights, and we got through it.
It's a
a
great
lot of fun.
video showing off sort of the game and then some of the components of how it was built.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we had to do it for a different competition, and we weren't going to be live anymore, so we wanted to make sure it was perfect, and we took like a whole night just trying to record it, and we were laughing, and oh my gosh, it was so fun. But
I think the amount of sleep-deprived cinematic trailers that have been
yes.
recorded in the game development industry is quite fairly large.
So we don't have a very risky game. There's nothing that is too crazy. There's nowhere where you get killed or anything, but there is a ledge that you can fall off of. So we had to go into the blueprints and make sure that you respawned with a cute little animation that you can see in the top corner. So if the player falls off the ledge, he'll come back and just start over again. And we have a lot of vista areas. I don't know if you saw in the beginning, Jo has like a really nice scene in her village area. But yeah, all of our skills got so much better from this project. We were in ZBrush, we were in Substance Painter, Designer, Maya, and I learned to love Unreal. We also did a puzzle mechanic that you see right here. So every time Ozias goes to one of the spheres, the writing on it lights up, and he has to match it to one of the dragon statues. And so if you go to the wrong statue, it doesn't really do anything. It was a lot of like if statements in the blueprints where it was like, if he goes to this one, nothing happens. A lot of testing out. And we just wanted to challenge the player a little bit. We wanted, again, our story to be the best part of our project, but we wanted something kind of fun and like to trick the player. So this part is like the highest challenge for Ozias to have to jump on the pillars. We got really used to the jump mechanics, so we were like pros. Every time we went through the game, we were like bam, bam, bam. But we had play tests, and people were like, "Oh my god, like I got it!" It was so fun watching them try to jump. But yeah, so we really did want to have like a boss battle kind of final scene with our dragon. However, we just kind of hinted that there was a dragon in our end cinematic, which you'll see in a minute. but we just wanted there to be some sort of like mystery element, maybe like in Osiris 2, where he like comes across the dragon finally, and yeah, we were just brainstorming at that point, but it was about a 10-minute game, I believe, or something, if you're a new player.
So I was wondering if the game is available to play somewhere.
Well, we have the packaged game, so we could like send it to anybody who really did want to play. But we don't actually have it up anywhere. We should probably put it somewhere now that I think about it.
Yeah, itch.io.
Yeah.
Itch.io is great.
Yeah. But so yeah, this is where he comes across the dragon egg, and which is huge. I just figured, I mean, you always see dragon eggs in like movies and they're like really small. I'm like, well, if it was a real dragon egg, wouldn't it be like gigantic? And our VisDev teacher helped us so much throughout the project. And he was like, you don't want scales on your dragon egg? Like, no, like that's in everything. You want to make it like crazy different. And so yeah, we had amazing staff, amazing faculty. They really pushed us to like farther than we thought we would ever go. But yeah.
So I remember seeing this project a couple months ago in one of the competitions, and just really being impressed. And then I found out that it was just a couple of you that made it, and was even more blown away because the amount of animation, the puzzles themselves were really, really impressive. And you guys have Niagara in here. You've got a ton of animation. You've got the cinematics, the blending, all of it was just a tremendous amount of work, and the level of polish. I mean, how did you guys pull all that together with such a small team?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. We spent a lot of late nights in the labs. I remember freshman year coming into Ringling, and one of the heads of game art told us, "You're gonna be here Sunday nights past midnight. Like, there's no, like, this is not a joke. Like, this is serious." And we were, and it was fun. We had a lot of fun, like sharing critiques with each other in the labs, and a lot of good people just like helping each other out. Honestly, our friends really like gave us a lot of help, and we would give them help, and it was a really good community in our game art class for sure.
So how did you divide the work? So
Oh
the
yeah, sorry. So
and
yeah, we just figured out our strengths from junior year. We had to do a sort of biome environment,
Mhm.
and we figured out what we really liked. I found out I really liked textures and materials, and so I decided I'd do some of the VFX things, waterfalls, particles, and Joe really loved characters and wanted to bring them to life. So she took on all of the animation and
Mhm.
everything that really brought our Osiris to life, which was awesome.
And then
But
somebody
other
had to figure out the puzzles too, because I mean, that's
oh,
the other thing that I remember watching it for the first time, is that, you're like, okay, it looks really cool, but then you start watching the gameplay, and then you're starting to realize that it actually is a well-designed game on top of that, because sometimes you can get sort of captured in the visuals, and you're like, it probably looks great, but is it a good game? And then you're like, this looks like a good game too, something that I'd like to play. So you guys did a good job of designing puzzles that seem compelling, and looks like something that could have life after school. So who designed the puzzles?
oh, thank you. Yeah. So we broke our area up into two sections, and during pre-production we figured out, okay, we're gonna have a puzzle here, we're gonna have a puzzle here. You'll take on this one, I'll take on this one. And so Joe did the shrine area where the
Mhm.
bridge was, and she just wanted to make sure that the player knew what the mechanic was. So immediately she said, "This is gonna be our cutscene. This is how we're gonna tell the character what he's doing." And she took on that whole area. That was her focus. Our game design teacher kind of guided us in the right direction. And then my area was the second kind of shrine area. And I was like, okay, I've done this before sophomore year, junior year. I kind of know how to do like a 3-key puzzle. And so I just kind of took that on with guidance from our professor as well. But yeah, they had taught us so much sophomore year. At this point, it was like, okay, we got this. Just, it was a lot.
Yeah, so clearly you're making it sound a lot simpler than it actually was.
I know, I'm going
But
back, I'm like,
another
"Wow,
part
those
of it,
were." Yeah.
and and I think everyone on this, group here knows that after you sort of put it together, you have to play test it and then say,
Yes.
is it fun? And it's hard to remain objective, right? Everyone here who makes games and has been through this process uh, goes through the process of testing something, and they're like, I don't know. I don't know if it's pretty. I don't know if it's fun. I don't know if it looks good. I have no idea. After you spend X amount of time on something like this, and but then you show it to people, and then they test it a little bit. And did you have a testing process? Did you have a process by which you were able to vet your ideas and thoughts and works even before you put a ton of artwork into it? Or how did you go through that, especially with such a small team? Because how can you be objective with a small group?
Right. Yeah, so our junior year, that was when we got out all of our ideas and we said, these are our three ideas, this is what we're like thinking of. So we got one that was chosen and we had to make a prototype for it, and it had to be approved and other people had to play it and make sure that it was fun and it made sense. And so we came up with the jump mechanic, and we just had a whole blocked out level, and we just kept going around and testing. And we actually had our friends do a play test, and they were jumping off of walls like into the sky, and we were like, okay,
Mhm.
so we need collision here. And it's really helpful when you get insight from other people who don't know how your game plays, because we were constantly going through, we were making sure like the player couldn't go over here, but since we knew our game, we needed that outside uh, help from other people. So yeah, we definitely had a lot of sessions where we were like, hey, can you test this? So that was super helpful. But yeah, uh, two people just it's
Right,
a lot.
right. Right, and I'm gonna have some of these same questions for the other guys on the group, and Victor, I don't by any means mean to, have all the questions, but here's another thing that I think is really, important is that, when you're making something of this scope and scale, there's a lot that you don't know, right? There's a lot about Unreal you don't know. There's plenty about, the development process that you don't know. How did you guys go about the process of figuring out the things that you don't know? Right? Because there's a lot to that, right? I don't know
Yeah.
about whatever Niagara particle systems. I don't know about how to make this blueprint. I don't know how to, finish my master material. I don't know how to get this puzzle to work. How in your process in your junior year, sophomore year, senior year, do you address the things that you don't know?
That's a really good question. So I think everyone in our year, because our class was really small on Game Art, it was about 30 people by senior year. Each of us developed strengths that we really knew so much about. So somebody knew a lot about textures, someone knew a lot about particles and animation, and we would kind of share knowledge back and forth and say, hey, I'm working on this wing material. Do you think there's anything in the blueprint that could fade this out better?
Hmm.
And so I would get advice from someone who had been working on that a lot, because the teachers knew so much, but since we were the students actually doing this constantly, you knew that your peer like knew so much about that they were going to give you an answer like that, and they knew giving you an answer like you would help them anytime as well.
Mm.
Um it was
So you
definitely
develop
like a mutual. I'm
that
sorry.
collaboration. You
Yeah.
develop that collaboration and through the process.
Yeah, and critiques. We had so many critiques that we learned how to critique each other and kind of give each other advice and build each other's projects up. I don't think without my peers our project would have been as uh, good as it was.
It's hard to say that, isn't it?
Yeah. But
It's
we
good.
were yeah, we
It's
were we
good.
were super proud of it, because junior year, like, we liked our game, but then senior year, we were like, "Wow, okay, this is awesome. I didn't know we could do this."
Someone mentioned in chat, I thought it was pretty accurate. They said that you utilize the tools of Unreal to their full potential, and I think that can be seen,
Mhm.
considering that there was only two of you. Someone else was mentioning or asking how long it took you. I think you mentioned 8 months.
Yeah, so we started Blockout, uh, for 2 months, I think, and we had the mechanic kind of down, and then after summer, we came back and started in September, actually working on the art, and then or September, August, and then our game had to be done by, like, May, uh, kind of April, so kinda like 8 months-ish, 9 months, but
So
pre-production, like, took a few months too, so I guess as a whole, maybe, like, 10, 11 months. Little under a year.
someone else is wondering if you did all of the programming in Blueprint, or if it was a mix of Blueprint and C++?
It was all Blueprint. Joe did so many character blueprints, and she would show me, and I was like, I have no idea what this means. And I was like, oh, but look at this. And I would show her all my nodes and like material stuff. She's like, I don't know what that means.
Well, it seems like you play to your strengths then, and that's a really good point. Something I think it's easy to forget when you start on a project. You want to jump into the mechanics real quick, right? You want to see your idea come to fruition as soon as possible, and it's easy to forget that it's going to take you months to produce this. And so a little bit of planning can go a really long way, right? Same comes with like just the one-day prototype or any of that are sort of first things that you can do. And it can be difficult, especially when you're first starting making games, right? You just want to make your game, and then you forget that like, oh, this framework that we need for the gameplay loop hasn't been built, but we have all the mechanics, and now they don't tie into that. So it's cool to see.
Yeah.
I was going to see. Someone else was curious if so the question was, are all the meshes baked? I assume with such an environment, you would either need to use lots of culling or mesh baking for low poly count.
Yes. So we did have a lot of culling in our game, and we were testing that too because we didn't want popping in our game. We didn't want you to walk over and see a tree just appear. So that was a big part at the end. We just kind of tried to optimize. And yeah, all of our dragon statue assets, Joe has one and I have one. We had to bake them, and they were giant meshes. So we were like, okay, this cannot be in our environment. But after school, I learned a lot more about the foliage tool and a lot of things that we could have probably optimized with. So there's so much about Unreal that you're just constantly learning. It's such a great tool. But yeah, a lot of baking.
Last question for now. They were curious what your process to do the lighting was. Did you use any special plugins, or is it all just default Unreal?
Yeah, we did a lot of post-process, and we messed with the settings a lot and have a lot of like lights scattered here and there to fake a certain mood. But yeah, mostly it was just the Unreal default. We had a sky sphere put in. We had like a panoramic photo, and we just kind of like photoshopped it and made it look more fantasy. Yeah, mostly Unreal.
Awesome. Was there anything else you wanted to leave our viewers with?
No, I want to thank my family and friends and everyone who helped us with this super awesome journey, and my amazing partner Joe. I know she's watching, and she's awesome.
Yeah, seen her in chat. Well, it's awesome. Thank you so much for your presentation. I know that you mentioned that you have to leave a little earlier, so feel free to dip out when you have to. And with that said, we will move over to, and I need to make sure I look at my notes properly here. It's time for Kate Baird to present Excalibots. Do you want me to start off with the trailer?
Yes, that would be awesome.
All right, let's do it. Excalibots. That's an awesome trailer. I love how you cued the sound cues with the animations to make it feel really impactful.
Yeah, that was a really interesting process that we had to undertake. Two of our teammates, they had to figure out how to transfer. So one of our animators, he wanted to animate all of it just in Maya because that was the way that he was most comfortable animating. And then we had to find a way to connect it all and transfer it into Unreal and then use the film aspect that Unreal has. And then we exported the clip, handed it over to one of our audio guys, and then he went in and added the audio cues. So it could all just come together just for the trailer. So that clip actually isn't in the game. We made that specifically for the trailer, but it was awesome that we were able to do it in Unreal so that we could kind of maintain that look of the game in the trailer.
That's awesome. Do you want to go ahead and share your slide deck?
Yeah. All right, can you guys see what I have up here?
It's still loading. Oh, we might have.
Oh,
Okay. I think you're back, Kate.
it should be okay.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. We see the slide deck.
Hello? Okay, awesome. So I just wanted to start off by showing a little bit of the pre-production work and kind of what led up to it. And, this will be peppered with just like some awesome visuals from our game that you can see prior to playing the game if you're interested. Yeah, here we go. We started we have a pretty large team. We ended the whole project with about 17 people working, but if you look at our little special thanks section, we had plenty more people participating in creating this project, as well as help from all of our wonderful professors at DigiPen. So for our gameplay inspiration, we wanted to start with key things that we wanted to achieve with our project. And so we drew a lot of inspiration from stories, Path of Destinies. And so one of the main things were like the camera. And the reason we went with that was because I experience a lot of motion sickness with a lot of games. And that kind of led us to pursue and look to other games that are more friendly to casual gamers that, don't make you motion sick. And so we wanted the camera to be far so that you could visually take in the environment when you're in exploration mode. And then when you're in combat, the camera would zoom in so you could focus on the characters and the awesome action that we have going on.
Would you consider that to be... Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, you can go ahead.
I was just curious, often when we design games, you don't find yourself in a situation where you have those problems, right? Or at least I think most don't. So how do you approach? What's the difference there? How do you approach it? Since you are actually a great test subject for those who do get motion sick from.
Yeah, so that took a little bit of finessing in Unreal. So we had our engineers kind of build these levels and set the camera to be kind of in the same place to do the to be in the same place. Sorry about that. So there was a lot of testing back and forth that we had to do. Like, the camera had to be like at a certain tilt and a certain height, make sure nothing clips in front of the camera. We had to figure out all of those things that kind of cause the motion sickness in order to kind of combat it and find solutions to be around it. So that was really good for us to like learn and use for moving forward with other aspects of the game. Yeah, and then a lot of Excalibots came from a creative place. We definitely started the world with characters. At the beginning, we knew that we wanted to make these kind of robot knight characters, and we had a lot of sketches and things like that just to build up that world. And then we ended up making all these characters, and so we have about like 5 non-player characters that are good guys, and then we have plenty of other enemies, including the final boss. So it's very interesting to see like all these like first little doodles and sketches that we made to kind of turn and make their way in Unreal. And so these shots were rendered for my portfolio, but in Unreal, and so it's just cool to see like how they would be shown in game, etc.
It's a great style.
Oh, thanks.
And who sort of helped develop and sort of lock in that look and feel?
So as the creative director, I was kind of the art lead, and so the way that our project went about was we had a first semester with a very small group of people just to prototype the game, figure out mechanics, and then also figure out the visuals. And so a lot of it just came from like sketching, finding references. We were inspired by just a lot of like other stylized art, and that's what we knew that we wanted to make was a stylized game, even if it wasn't Unreal, because I know that a lot of things created in Unreal tend to be very realistic, and Unreal is really good at rendering realism and things like that. But then there's other games like Fortnite, obviously, that take on more of a stylized look, and so we wanted to go down and kind of discover how much stylization you could achieve in Unreal.
Sure. And one of the other things I noticed is you guys had a lot of programmers on your team.
Mhm.
What, like 5 or 6? How many did the first slide seem to have the team
Yeah.
break?
We had about 5 or 6. I can't remember. They were just like everyone just kind of felt like a big family to me. So it was
Seems like a wealth of programmers, for a student team. That's a really healthy amount, which
mhm,
brings me to kind of the question of when you have such a good number of folks that are capable of being utilized as programmers. Did you have like a lead programmer? If you were sort of the lead artist or the lead
mhm.
creative, did you have a lead technical director who
Yes.
was able to give a lot of direction? And with that many programmers, did you guys generate a lot of custom code in C++ and integrate that, or was it mostly Blueprint? Or how did that part work? I know that that's not particularly your area of expertise, but there was a lot of I don't know if you have the capability of going back to that slide, but that
Yeah.
to me
I
is
can go
I've
ahead
not
and go
seen
back.
a whole lot of student projects with that many programmers, in a while anyway.
Mhm. So, the way that DigiPen is set up, we have like a certain population of computer science students. We have art students. So our school is just largely programmers and things like that. And uh, a lot of programmers and designers tend to go to, work on their own projects that are more experimental or with other programmers. But then there's some of the larger teams, which ours would be one of them. Um, Typically just involve a lot of artists. And so when we have a lot of like artists and programmers working together, that's when we had a lot of fun to discover those things. To answer your question, I'm not exactly sure how much custom code went into all of those things. I think I was just kind of like up to my eyeballs in managing all of the art expectations and things like that. But I'm super grateful for all of the programmers that we had on our team because a lot of them, they were also like kind of hybrid game designers as well. And so a lot of their expertise also came in with level design and narrative design and being able to apply those in a technical way.
Yeah, so now that I look at it, it looks like that
Mhm,
that group of devs is really using a lot of different roles, producers and designers, and one of
mhm.
them is listed as a full-time programmer. But you're saying that a lot of these guys and girls did a mix of roles, whether
Yes,
they
a lot of design work as
yeah,
well.
yeah. Yeah, that makes more sense because I saw dev, I was like, "Wow, that's a lot of pro."
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, please continue. I just
Oh,
was
yeah,
like,
no problem.
I'm getting
Yeah, that
excited.
was a really awesome question. I appreciated that. So one of the biggest things was to kind of create the world and use all of that. And so Chin Cha, he was a really awesome teammate that we had, and he was our environment technical artist, and he put together like this like toolkit of things that we could use to build houses. And so just using like a kit like this to put it together and kind of make all these different variations. Um, uh, kind of helped us populate our world. He also used a combination of Houdini plugins with Unreal to create these like spline tools that we could use for set dressing purposes and things like that, which was really awesome. Sorry, do you have a question?
No, I said nice. That's great.
Okay, cool. And then we have these kits of things to help build our environment. Here's some of our like prototypes of what that would look like. And then we turned out with something like this. I don't think I'll be the first one to say, or definitely not the last to say, that like lighting and set dressing really kind of like takes it the whole 9 yards, like the rest of the way. So it was really awesome to see and use Unreal set dressing tools to kind of achieve this look in a lot of our levels. And lighting was a big factor in being able to like change the setting of the world so that it looks like you were progressing through and going somewhere else, even though a lot of the assets are reused. And the only thing that's really different is the lighting and a little bit of particles. But it was neat to use it to create just kind of like a fuller environment. A lot of the environment work that we did was pretty crazy for this. And just if I may, I wanted to show a little bit more of some of our super special little details that we wanted to put in our game. So we came to a eureka moment eventually where we're like, well, what is our character fighting for? Like, why is he fighting these like goblin characters? And we're like, well, maybe he just really loves swords. And we kind of took that and ran with. We wanted to make the whole game kind of more about this like guy that wants sword, and that's kind of how we led to our like opening cinematics and things like that. But I think using that as the humor helped a lot in creating these things. And then we did put a lot of love into this, and so we have like these little details of like paintings in the throne room, and the throne room wallpaper is actually like a pattern with the little king on it, and then also his special sword, which is really important because that's like the first thing that gets stolen, which is why you have to go out and find it. And even like just taking that style that we had and echoing it in a lot of our UI elements kind of like brought it all together. So that's something that I wanted to share with you all. And then that was kind of the end of my slide deck, and I just wanted to say that Excalibots is free to download on Steam.
We pasted the link in chat earlier. See if we can get it again. Thank you so much, Kate. It's really exciting. It makes me want to play it. I will probably play that after the stream today since it's easy to access. Let's see if we had a couple of questions for you. I can go ahead and deal with that first. Someone was curious which game inspired you most or has inspired you the most. Oh, I think we lost Kate. Okay, are you back?
I'm
okay. Yes,
here.
Yes, we hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I just stopped screen sharing.
Did you hear my question?
No, I did not.
Okay. So someone in the chat was wondering which game have inspired you the most.
So definitely Stories Path of Destinies, because it had a lot of narrative moments and ways to like tell the story through funny dialogue. Obviously, we didn't have the audio capabilities to just kind of like record unique narrators and things like that. So we used text boxes in the game to go through that and just kind of like exploring the world, and then combining it with combat was kind of one of the main things that we loved about that game. And so that was pretty much our biggest inspiration there.
Someone else was curious, in which stage of development is this game? Are you adding more content to it?
So no, this game is finished. It took us 3 semesters, which is 15 weeks each. So that's about 45 weeks total as a whole team. Granted, like different team members filtered in and out depending on who graduated and things like that. Not like if they graduated, just like we had seniors on our team and then they graduated, and then so we started our junior year, and so we kind of kept working on it as the project progressed. So this game is finished. Some of we've gotten some like feedback and comments on Steam saying that like, oh, this game is like too short. It was little. It was, but that was kind of all we had time for, considering that we were students and we were working on this game part-time.
That's
I've got a
awesome.
couple questions.
Yeah.
So, this is a very different kind of production experience compared to Mary and what her experience was with Osiris, sorry, and you had many more developers on it,
Mhm.
significant amount of time. So, in a situation where you had people coming in and off of it, did you guys use some kind of revision control? Is that something that's taught at DigiPen?
Yes, so we used Perforce for pretty much like the entire project.
Mhm.
Obviously, like our school had some issues with Perforce, and then it went down a couple of times, and so that was like kind of a stressful thing to work with. But at the same time, it was just like a big learning experience to learn how to work with that, and that's helped a lot going into the professional world and using that in the professional setting. And so that was really um, a big learning experience of just being able to work with those and the engine.
Right. Now, did you guys know going from, say, semester 1 to semester 2 that it was going to be a
Mhm.
multi-semester thing, and then you had a ability to sort of do some documentation that allowed people coming into the
Mhm.
project in the second or third semester to know what they were picking up from either an art or a
Mhm.
code perspective, so that you had a good clean handoff? Or was that something you had to learn and figure out, oh, we better prepare this material for someone else?
Mhm. So we knew that our project was going to be at least like 2 semesters long. So depending on like how far you get and whether you get the green light for your project, and so that's something that our school kind of takes on as like a review process near the end of the semester. And that's kind of like similar to how in the industry, like if your project gets greenlit or is in a certain place. So that was a big factor in getting ready and meeting those deadlines in order to move on. So we were never like absolutely sure if we were able to get past that point. And there were a lot of projects that started in our cohort, and then like the devs decided that maybe this isn't the right way to go, and then so a lot of teams like chose to abandon their project or to disband their teams and things like that. And that was actually kind of fortunate for our team. So our team didn't start off as very large, but then some other teams, they chose to
See.
disband or not able to support their artists and stuff like that. And so that's where we got like a big team of artists. So a lot of them came from another team.
So it's built into your process is to have to quit
Yes.
and then to succeed semester after semester so that
Mhm.
you accumulate team members, and your producers in essence have to help carry on the practice a little bit, or
Yes.
you persist, your producers persist, or they don't persist either.
Not necessarily. We actually had our producer switch um, the last semester that we were working on it. And so we made it to a place where we were able to polish. And that was like the main semester that we got a lot of like our work and final work done. So even in that case, we had to like make sure that we had everything documented. But from the very beginning, we were like expected to have like technical documents and like
Yeah.
technical art. Um, Documents and practices, file structures. I mean, like, granted, a lot of it got messy because that can happen sometimes when you're making games and you're in a rush and things like that. But it was
Awesome.
like kind of built into our process to like make that documentation, kind of onboard new members and make sure that they're I guess, like, have everything that they need. But granted, that wasn't always the case because it's hard for us who are still learning. Some of us were very new to Unreal Engine. And so it was very expected that we weren't supposed to have all of the answers. But,
Yeah.
we were able to work around it.
So just one more question. If you had one tip to give a group, a cohort coming into a project like this in some class later on the DigiPen, what would
Mhm.
you give?
Um, I guess, like, the main
Get
thing
your
that.
sleep the semester before.
Huh?
Get your sleep the semester before.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it would come down to just doing as much research as possible. I think the reason that we were able to get as far as we did was because we had different specializations of our different team members. Granted, we had like a couple different hats. For example, I was in charge of most of like the character rigging and things like that. And so I had to work with the engineers about like animation blending and doing research into that part. But obviously, like me, just little me, didn't have the bandwidth to go delve into lighting. And so we had someone go and do a lot more research in that and environment, like things like that. And so being able to have team members that are interested in looking into their specific area and seeing how they can like learn those skills, because Unreal is a very vast engine, and so it's like it's hard to have like one person know everything, like Mary said earlier. And so having and divvying up those responsibilities and education on your own helps a lot.
Awesome.
There's one more question that came in from chat, and then we'll move on. Projects in a school environment must be fun. Do you feel like it helped you develop on a budget for future projects?
Yeah, I think the time constraint definitely brought a lot of realistic experience to it, because in the industry you'll have like publishers and you'll have people who are investors and things like that. Just kind of like expecting you to know how to estimate your work and helping you scope your project. And so being able to have that time constraint in mind, those pre-existing deadlines helped a lot in making sure that we stayed within scope, or made sure that we had enough people and resources to achieve what we wanted. So I think that helped a lot going into the industry.
And there you go, folks. Excalibots is live out on Steam right now. Go get it.
Yeah.
Exciting. Well, thank you so much, Kate. I know that you also said that you had to leave early. Feel free when you have to just do a little wave and dip out.
Okay.
Awesome. Great. Next up, we are going to show off Rome, which is Alethea's project, or among others, I would think. Ooh, now it's time for me to fix the thirds here. But let's get started. First off, you want me to go ahead and play the trailer?
Yes, please.
All right.
Derek, where are you? Derek? Seriously, cut it out. This isn't funny anymore. Where are you?
Hey, did you hear about what happened?
Where the hell am I? What the hell is happening?
That's just the way it is sometimes.
I just want to go home.
All right. Super cool little trailer there. I will let you go ahead and start your screen share if you're ready.
I am, thank you. Give me 1 second. Alright. See everything alright?
Let's see. I'm not seeing anything yet.
Alright. Oh, yep. That's because I goofed a button. There we go.
All right.
How does
we're
that look
seeing
for
it.
you?
Looks good.
Cool. So yeah, I'm the lead producer for Rome, which was our capstone project. And I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of overview and then kind of dive into the process of making Rome. So Rome tends to have a playtime of 45 to 80 minutes, though if you're a more experienced gamer and you kind of like blast through it, I've seen it done in like 15. Our genre we were aiming for was psychological horror, and we developed using Agile with Scrum as our methodology. We had about 16 weeks with 15 hours per week, and we had a team size of 14 members. And I just wanted to show off my gorgeous team. So we had 5 leads, 3 LDs, 2 SDs, and 4 artists. And I have no idea how we got as much done as we did. I had an incredibly hardworking and passionate and talented team to work with, and that was really incredible. So I just wanted to show off all of the work that, or the people who were behind the work that you're about to see. So a big thing on Rome was that the design of the game and the art of the game were actually really interlinked, to a point where we had to kind of break away from some of the traditional ways we had learned of how to do game design independently in our own disciplines, and had to kind of come back together and regroup and figure out how we were going to design the space. And I'll delve into that in a minute. So when Rome was first pitched, when we were in pre-production, it was going to be a scary house game with like monsters and demons and, like a phone mechanic. And as we were going through pre-production, it wasn't fun. It wasn't turning out how we wanted it to be. And our game designer had been playing around with, so we played a bunch of different horror games, especially games like, we played like Simulacra, and we played like more traditional things like Outlast, and then things like the PT playable trailer and 8 Pages and all of that. And he came to me and he's like, look, I'm really vibing with this idea of doing kind of like a non-Euclidean tech, like an MCS or Nightmare world, where the actual world of the house and the world that you're in is what's threatening, rather than having some sort of monster chase you or some death state that's a threat to the player. And that way, as they're exploring it, it feels like the environment itself is combative against them. And so we started playing with this idea, and one of the things that we noticed is that we really wanted to lean for a kind of more modern-esque house and world, rather than a traditional like Victorian or Craftsman that you see in a lot of typical horror games, so that we could have kind of these sharp edges and boundaries. And one of our artists soon came up with this concept piece for us, and we saw it and we immediately fell in love and knew this was the style that we wanted to go for. And part of that was we had this idea of the world needs to be as normal as possible when you first start, so it's really drastic and you can tell that we're breaking the rules. So this is one of her second concept pieces, of kind of what the world might look like with things starting to break and looking wrong, and with the geometry starting to be off. So you have these like really tall chairs in the front, impossibly tall, and like staircases from nowhere, and nothing's quite right in the image, but you can tell it's still a base image of the house. And then kind of playing with what are more ways to like twist the world, make it more threatening, so this piece is almost like eyes peeking out with the lights and how bright they were, and how did we get that across. So what that ended up with is a really realistic looking art style. Here's a shot from in-game of the kitchen before the world kind of goes crazy, and here's another shot of one of the offices, with one of the interactable models we have in our game. And then we wanted things to be flipped. So this is the art gallery in one of the portions of our game where the world gets a little bit more crazy. And you can tell like the benches are on the ceiling and the paintings are all across the floor, because we really wanted it to be a first moment of, wow, something is wrong here. So because of how we did the design on Rome, we really needed our artists who are making sure that things were realistic as possible to work side by side with our LDs who are making these kind of like crazy, what is wrong with our team called them as chaos moments, and have them be side by side. So we ended up actually kind of pairing artists with LDs so we could specifically have the mod kits placed in ways that followed the design that we had, because our art lead had a really well thought out, really well done design document. And still keep it stylized correctly while allowing the LDs to have these chaos moments built in that they had designed. So alongside that, we also had to build a lot of the non-Euclidean tech for our game in the world. And so I just wanted to kind of show off what that looked like in POCT, and then what that looked like in the final game. So one of the first things we wanted to do was this rotating hallway. I'm just going to pull that up. That would literally move around the player as you walk down it, because we wanted to feel like the whole world and house was moving around the player in different aspects. And then one of the one of the next pieces that we did was this growing door. So we basically, one of our SDs made this door tech where it's really small when you first get to it, and then it would grow larger as you got closer to it, and then it would freeze after you've triggered it to become larger. So for us, that would look something like this. So this is one of the parts. I believe it's in level 2 or 3. So you come through and the gallery's messed up. And this is one of our in-game puzzles. So a lot of Rome has these miniature versions of larger objects that exist in the world that correspond, and you have that growing in. We ended up refitting that mechanic, so rather than it being the player is triggered by walking closer to it, it was triggered by the puzzle and walking, but then the blows up so the door can pop in. And then along with that, we had portal technology, which you can see some of here. You're falling down what's supposed to be a very long tunnel, but it's not as long in game world because we basically made portals for the game. And I'll go more into that in a second. And then there's that rotating hallway in game, and you can kind of see moving forward what those small pieces that we did within the first few weeks of development look like once they're all built and together. So, one second here. Looks like the video is breaking my slides. I'm very sorry. So with Portal Tech, here's one of our initial tech demos. We're just showing off that we basically created a object where once a different object falls into it, walking volume, it'll shoot off in a direction set by our team, which for us, we really liked pairing with some of the artifacts. Our art lead made this fisheye lens, basically, where it would warp everything in the world when you went through it, which has allowed us to hide any hitches in the portal effect. So when you walk through that fisheye there in the game, you're actually getting portaled to a different place in this labyrinth that our GD made. That allows you to kind of walk through and jump in different places of the game. So that's kind of pieces that we made and how they click together. The other thing I wanted to talk about was we actually got a lot of external help outside of our team. So I wanted to point out some of those places that existed. So for us, like our sound effects, we used a lot of Creative Commons SFX recordings, especially a lot of ones that are produced and released in conjunction with GDC. And then we also had several team members doing recordings, myself included. I know at one point my game designer came in and he had a recording on his phone. He's like, I want something that sounds like this. And I was like, well, why don't you send me that file and we'll just put that sound in the game for one of the dripping effects we had early on. And then we actually were really lucky. SMU Meadows School has a master's program for voice actors. And we were able to work with 2 really, really talented voice actors in their program to voice both our main character, Haley, and her husband, Derek, and their lines. So we had a mixture of people. Myself went down one day, and one of our artists, Jason, went down to do recording sessions on our main campus with them, and then did all of the audio editing back in our own team. And we actually worked with a sound school in New Mexico for all of the main background noise and music. All of the composing was done by them in the game, and basically we met with them, I think, once every 2 weeks, and our game designer was emailing with them, I think, almost daily, just kind of adjusting things and tweaking things and getting tracks built. And they built us a track, I believe, for every single level of the game. So that was a really fantastic experience. And then lastly, we actually were able to work with the Frisco ISD Career and Technical Education Center to talk to some architects who were willing to work with us and give our artists some advice on how to get our dimensions right and how to get the layout of this really stylized modern house that we wanted to create correct. So we used a lot of external resources for what we wanted to get done in our project that we just couldn't handle ourselves as the team that we were. And then my wheelhouse, I was just going to talk to you a little bit about the production that happened on our team. So I kind of have it broken up, task tracking and planning. We used Handsoft in conjunction with Perforce, which we used for our software for forgetting my words. And basically, Handsoft lets you do project management inside it. And then I did daily meetings before we had what we call our 4 hours with my leads. And we set up worry boards just to kind of track what we were worried about getting done on the project and how different assets were moving along the pipeline, just to make sure that I could keep track of all of that. And then we actually found with my art team that they really liked having just a asset list worked off of and checked box off of. So I worked with my art lead to make sure they always had a generated asset list alongside of their tasks in Perforce, just to help them track things easier on their end. And then we also had what I would call stakeholder feedback meetings. So for us, we had about 1.5 to 2 week long sprints. And afterwards, we would need to present to a team of stakeholders that worked with us. And they would give us feedback live during our capstone presentations, but we would also get a written list of feedback documentation. And one of the things that really helped our team with tracking and planning was going through all of the feedback we got from stakeholders and from team members on our own team about what we felt where the project was at and what style was going and kind of our trajectory. And meeting before we did any planning for the next sprint and going over those lists point by point so we could talk about what was going well and what we needed to pivot on, if anything, and how we needed to readjust our expectations as the game went on. And then on what I would call like the soft and squishy end of things, one of the things I tried to do is make sure that I had a one-on-one meeting about 5 to 10 minutes long with every member of my team each sprint, just to check in with them and see how things are going with them and what support they needed, or if any part of the project was stressed out for them. And then we actually had full team retrospectives after every milestone. And we brought those into our stakeholder feedback meetings as well, where we got to do pre-planning to make sure that we were incorporating some of that advice. And then lastly, one of the things I was responsible for was trying to do some team and morale building activities with my team. So one of the things that I tried to do after Alpha is I actually made a bunch of pinatas, because our game was developed mostly in fall, and had the team do kind of having one person blindfolded and having the team lead them to able to hit the pinata. And one of the things that I tried to do was make sure that the team had kind of a role reversal with the leads team. So for a while, we put the team in charge of all of the leads, and they could tell them to like walk anywhere they wanted or to swing at things, and just kind of give everyone like a bit of like stress relief. You get a whack at stuff, and there's candy and a little bit of just like working together and team bonding. So. And then lastly, I was just going to talk about kind of a mini postmortem of the entire project, of kind of things that went really well for us and some stuff that didn't go so well, and kind of what we learned from it to move forward and hopefully can help other people in their own projects. So for us is pretty early on after we pivoted in our direction, we had a really strong art vision and a really strong lead artist who kind of pushed and drove the team in the correct place and had a really well done ASG and was really detailed in what he wanted. We also had a lot of work, like I said earlier, working with external contractors and just having really good people to help move along our efforts. And I think the communication amongst the leads team in particular was really well done. Like I loved working with my entire leads team. They were all incredibly hardworking and incredibly passionate and probably incredibly patient, in my opinion, people. And some stuff that went wrong with that for us, as I noted in the beginning, that we really had to redesign the interaction and the roles with artists and level designers. And I think it took us a few sprints to actually develop that plan properly to the level that our team needed for that support. Because when we first started, we're like, yeah, and you'll work together, right? And didn't really give any support or guidance. So as a team, we like sat down and figured out how those roles would be divvied up a little bit better. The other thing that was a challenge for us in the beginning is we would get a difference in what the leads team were receiving as feedback and what the full team was getting in feedback. So during our capstone presentations, our stakeholders are very open about just kind of like anything they see. So if like a doorknob is sized incorrectly, it's going to be pointed out. If there's a hitch, it's going to be pointed out. And it's just kind of off the cuff as you're going responses. But then when they step more into a teacher role, because their stakeholders are faculty and teachers at the school, we would get a more cohesive report of what they really liked or didn't like and what expectations we had met as students. Unfortunately, when we first started, the full team was getting kind of the off-the-cuff commentary, and our leads team were getting kind of the more positive, like, hey, you guys got this far, this is excellent. So our leads team would come back to the team and be like, we're doing awesome. And our team would be like, but we just got kind of torn apart for an hour on everything that's wrong with our game. What do you mean we're doing great? This is part of the reason we started really strongly incorporating the written documentation with feedback, and we asked our stakeholders to include stuff that we were getting our lead stakeholder meetings in that documentation so that our team knew it was passed down and it wasn't just their leads team being overly optimistic. And then we also had a lot of issues with both our lighting and our portal technology breaking, especially as we got towards the end of our project. We managed to fix it thanks to having revision control and using Perforce was a big help for us. But we often had our lighting maps break, and when we were trying to build lighting, they would break just because of how complex everything was in our game. And it was one of the second or third games that our lighting team had lit, and you had both LDs and artists moving lights around and then rebaking, and so we had some issues there. And then we also had our portal tech, hitch sometimes. And we ended up doing things like that fish eye effect on different portals so that even if the game world hitched, it made it feel more like an effect. So we basically took our bug and made it a feature as much as possible. And then for us, I think one of the biggest takeaways for our team was using Racy more. I think halfway through, we started really aggressively using Racy to help with that kind of we're in pairs, who's doing what kind of divvying of work, and then how to pass down that feedback that I said earlier, getting that positive feedback back to our team. And then for me, it was working on how to create multiple ways of task tracking one project, because I was worried about splitting up where everything was being tracked too much, but doing things like creating the asset list or creating just a quick run-up board where people can see what assets and what different components of our game were done, made it so that even though they were still using their tasks in Handsoft, that they had a quick, easy way to look at things rather than digging through a bunch of tasks in that application. And then the last lesson I had was don't be your own placeholder voice actor, because before we got our very talented voice actors from SMU Meadows, I was the place voice actor for the game, and during meetings, people would joke that if our audio would mess up, I could just say the line under my breath really quick and hope our stakeholders wouldn't notice it in the middle of it. But I think by the second sprint of having my voice in there, I was ready to never play the game with volume on ever again. So yeah, that's kind of the overview of how we built Realm. As our team says, Realm wasn't built in a day. But over 16 weeks. And yeah, you guys can download it on Steam for free. And I think that's everything I have.
That's awesome. Super impressive. Quite surprised that you all decided to dive into the realm of non-Euclidean spaces in a student project. That's I was a little bit curious what games inspired you and made you sort of aware of the non-Euclidean level design?
So I would say I am blanking on the name of the game that I'm thinking about right now, and I feel so bad. It's a horror game with paintings in it, a lot of paintings. I know Control came out about midway through our project, and we did look at different elements of it, but we had already kind of decided on that direction. Layers of Fear. That's the biggest game that inspired us. Sorry, it took me a minute. Layers of Fear was a huge one for our team and our GD in particular, because it had that kind of scary stuff is happening, but not an absolute monster in the world. And nothing really like aggressively chasing you, not one main villain type of game. I know we also looked at games like Soma. And we looked at the layout of also like Amnesia Darkest Descent and Machine for Pigs, just as kind of a weaving through spaces where you can kind of do laps, because in Rome there's a lot of places where you can loop around and the house is really big and players can choose to go on a main path or to go on kind of like meander about and find all the little pickups and items and story moments if they want to. So we really tried to hit on, if you explore, you'll get rewarded for it. There's little tidbits, but if you go down just the main path to get you out of the house, you won't lose anything.
Yeah, I'm sure some folks would be interested in the tech. Maybe if one of your developers who built that wants to chime in, feel free to do that on the forum announcement thread where we announce the stream. I'm sure some folks would be interested to hear how you were able to accomplish that.
Yeah.
I know that for me, I watched this trailer, and I think I've seen some more in-depth trailers on the making of Roan. And at first you watch it and you are like, I'm not sure what I'm seeing, because you are moving through the space and you are like, this could be, if you don't know what you're watching, you're like, is this an architectural visualization piece? And then as things begin to change, you're like, what exactly am I seeing? And then because I think that in some of the early trailers or some of the trailers that I've seen, you don't really divulge exactly what's happening, right? And so if you sit and watch and you watch things begin to change and things get a little bit more chaotic, you start to go, oh my, what is going on here? And if you watch some of the gameplay, it really becomes extremely fascinating. And what you're actually doing technically is mind-boggling, and it becomes incredibly compelling. And I was really blown away, both technically and artistically, and in a design capacity, what you were able to pull off. You said it's almost 80 minutes of gameplay if you really play it slowly, right?
Yeah.
And I think it was an amazing accomplishment for how uncomfortable you can make people feel in this game, considering how much is changing and how you are making what was familiar a minute ago unfamiliar all of a sudden again, in Unreal Engine, in a student game, but also, you guys are master students there at Guildhall, so you are investing a tremendous amount of time, and but it's also not an undergraduate program. You're there for 2 years. How long are you there
Yeah.
for?
2
You're there
years.
for 2 years, and you undertake a tremendous amount. You've clearly iterated a lot on this game. And then you've got a significant team, but then you're biting off a lot in trying to create an experience that is not standard, not typical, that you could maybe not pull off, right? But if you watch it and I haven't played it yet, but I think you convey it in the gameplay footage that you release, that it is very uncomfortable, that is very dynamic, and that both technically and from a design perspective, you are achieving a tremendous amount. When, in my opinion, with what you watch at the beginning, it's almost like a bait and switch. You're like, I'm not sure what I'm watching. This is an architectural visualization. No, there's something really wrong here. And then you are like, this is quite compelling. And I, really want to explore this world, but I don't know if I want to, because it's not like you said, a monster jumps out of the closet and stabs you with a knife. It's much more subtle, and I love that subtlety about what's happening until it becomes less subtle, and then you're like, I don't know that I wanted it to be less subtle.
Yeah, I know. For us, one of the things that our team really debated on was what and how much we wanted to show in the story, because the game is really designed to kind of unfold out in front of the player. But we did struggle with, okay, we want them to be interested. We don't want them to just think like, great, you have a pretty house. We didn't want to give away too much early on. And like you said, there was probably a bit of time up until first playable for us where some of our stakeholders like, are you sure you guys know what you're doing? Is this the right direction for you guys to go in? And especially because a lot of the other games that our program tends to produce are a lot more like mechanical or puzzle heavy. And ours is a lot more about building an experience. And So we did get a lot of feedback, like, are you going to put in more puzzles? Are you going to put in like these elements? We're like, nope.
Yeah, you have to be patient.
fun.
You have to expect your audience to be willing to mature with the experience, and I think that's impressive. If the audience enjoys that or is willing to go for the ride, which I think a lot of really good experiences are worth that, right? You know. So yeah, I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, and I think we got very fortunate in having kind of those extra, like I said, the people we worked with externally. Like when the voice acting came in, I think I saw like our team take a deep breath of like, oh, this is going to be good. Especially after having to listen to my terrible placeholder on loop for weeks and being like, our game is terrible. We're gonna like fail out of grad school and we're gonna be wannabe game designers, like working digging ditches. So and just all of us were kind of, there's a moment for our team where we really hit our stride when we saw the pieces starting to click together, because for a while it felt like it was really challenging for us, because when you're designing horror, you get numb to it. So like our game isn't scary anymore, our game isn't interesting, it's not fun, and actually seeing playtester footage, I think, was the other thing that really helped bring us back. We had a external producer who was in charge of both QA and playtesting / usability for us, and I was talking to that producer, and they're like, okay, I'm going to come in and bring some footage and bring feedback for your team, and that just really helped bolster the experience and let us push forward that bit more. So I'd always say, you can get playtesting done, it can be really, really helpful, not just for, like in the beginning, it really helped us change up what we were doing mechanics-wise, but later on, it was just a huge morale boost for the team.
Congratulations.
Yeah, big congratulations. Do you have any advice for people that may work with voice actors in the future?
Yeah, I would say have examples of what you want / have a really well thought out idea of what you want. You know, when we came into one of our sessions, we asked a voice actor, like, can you just make like demonic noises? And our voice actor kind of looked at us, he's like, what do you mean by that? Like, what do you want in full? And fortunately, we kind of wrote like some chanting on the fly, and he did a great job with it, but I felt so bad. The other thing I would say is do a lot of different takes. And if they're offering you the time, like our voice actor offered to do like a bunch of B-roll takes with us, and some of those ended up being pieces that we like cut a chunk out of and are actually in the final game, rather than a line that we did at the first point of it. I would also say save your voice acting until the further end of your project, just because you're going to go through iterations and changes, and it sucks to have to like rebook and re-record everything because you've gone through narrative changes. We had done the bulk of our narrative changes before we did the voice acting, but even post voice acting, there was a few changes that we needed to make, and we kind of had to either supplement with having some lines that were just on objects which don't have audio in our game, or trying to kind of Frankenstein a few of the clips so it said what it needed to.
Did you also use onomatopoeia for sound effects?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. That's one of my go-tos at a game jam. I just sit and record weird sounds for half an hour, and then I put them in the game so that everyone knows that there's supposed to be audio there.
Yeah. My underground background was in audio recording design, so I did a bunch of recording for our team on different effects and noises for them to put in as placeholder early on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alethea. If you can, please stick around. We can do a little bit of a Q&A section at the end once we're all done. Next up, we have Jaime Toes, and I think we know where we're coming. I'm going to start off with the trailer, as long as you're good with that.
Let's do it.
Cool. This is Malediction. love the music in the trailer. Someone in chat said that as well. Yeah, super cool.
Yeah, that was done by a very talented composer at FI, Aaron Sendin. He did the music for all the Capstone games that year, so he was a busy guy.
Wow. Yeah, I bet. Cool.
Anyways,
Floor's yours.
yeah. So I don't have a PowerPoint, so you're gonna have to look at my ugly mug for the next bit. But so for Malediction, it was an interesting process. We had a pretty big team. We started with 16 people. We had 4 programmers, 2 level designers, 5 artists, which included 2 tech artists, 2 3D modelers, and an animator. We had 2 technical designers, a project manager, and myself as the project lead. And from the beginning, we tried to create a very cooperative environment so that even the game design was something that we had the whole team take a part of. We started off by asking everybody what kind of stuff did they want to work on. We had some people say they wanted to do physics puzzles, others wanted to do an eccentric character that was in third person, others wanted to work with lighting. And we got a big list, compiled it all together, handed it to the team, and said, okay, here's what everybody wants to do. Make a game design pitch. We'll see if there's any recurring trends that everybody seems to draw on. And everybody did their pitch. The design lead went through and picked out elements that was common in all of them. And eventually we came up with this puzzle platformer that we wanted to have the physics elements of telekinesis and time control. Because we thought that'd be a good combination of stuff to put together and would make for some really interesting mechanics. As for the visual style, we drew inspiration from late 90s, early 2000s platformers, particularly Sly Cooper, for those of you that are familiar with that. And with those in mind, we started rolling, and we made pretty good progress. But just so that nobody gets discouraged, even several months into the game design process, Victor, could you pull up the first video for me, please?
Yeah, I got you. Oh,
so
right.
Even several.
Here, let me make sure I do my screen share so you can actually see what I'm.
Awesome.
What I'm showing everyone else here.
Okay.
And there we go.
So this is about 3 months into the design process. You're still going to be working with prototype elements. This is when we just started doing the second level, and we're testing our telekinesis, our material effects on that, as well as you saw a bit of the time going on there. And when designing the levels, we were very careful to ensure that levels were designed in a way that the player would, if not know what to do, be able to learn what to do in order to progress, and then have another tool in their belt for future puzzles. And the level design process was also something that was open to the entire team. Yes, the level designers were the ones that eventually implemented it, but for the level planning, there was 4 of us that were really in on every single one of them. It was me, 2 engineers, and our mechanical level designer. And we would sit in a room for 2 to 4 hours, depending on the day, and just go to town, trying to combine all of our mechanics together in as many unique ways as possible, and then come up with different ways that they can be used for puzzles, and then try to put them in a sequence that makes sense. For instance, okay, does the player know how to use the push game mechanic at this point? No? Okay, how are we going to teach them to do that? Oh, right, so we've taught them how to push. How can we make this more complicated? How can we throw a wrench in the whole program to make it so that they have to apply it in a different way? And we did this several times and did this for each of the 3 levels. Eventually, once you get through all that planning, you get to the polish stage, which, Victor, if you could do the second video for me.
Coming right up.
So at the polish stage, you're making things look pretty, you're trying to make things more performant, and you're learning new tools. And as you saw there, the fountain disappeared because we were experimenting with level streaming. And okay, interesting. We're back to the first
Oh,
video.
yes, we are. This was the interesting VLC thing that I discovered. Just a little moment. Had a similar thing last week. Did you want me to repeat that video?
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with, if you've never worked with level streaming, you have to make sure that the objects are set to the right volume for streaming. Otherwise, once you get out of a certain space, it'll disappear like that fountain did. So that was a good learning experience, and I think by doing level streaming, we ended up saving a good 5-10 frames for that section. And eventually, you get to the point where you've got a good product that you're proud of. The last video, please.
It's coming right up.
At this point, we've
one
got.
moment. I'm not sure why it just stops playing. Hang on. It's like when I pause it, it doesn't like that at all. Nope. Sorry about that, folks. I'm gonna have to close VLC and open it again. Oh, it is. My bad. Please go ahead.
So at this point in the game, we've got all of our visual effects in. We've got our enemy AI. We've got our character the way we want it. The environments and the lighting are looking the way you want it to. And it's just a really good feeling seeing it all come together after starting from gray boxes, which for the middle duration, it's really rough looking at gray boxes, knowing, hey, we've only got a few more months before we got to get this out the door. Now, an important part of all this is, of course, playtesting, as many of the others have spoken about, because you need to know, and especially in our case, we need to make sure that what made sense to us, particularly for the puzzle design, made sense and was intuitive to people who never experienced our game before. And we did playtests with high school students, with students from the undergrad program, amongst each other, from other student teams. And it was always a good feeling to, after having sat in those puzzle design meetings for several hours, to see that, yes, what you designed, like the order that you put things in, made enough sense that players would grasp what you were what you were putting down. If there are any questions, go ahead and throw them my way.
Let me go ahead and do a quick one. I'm sure Lewis has a couple.
Yeah. So did you tell us? So you were the project lead, and
right.
I know Faya has been using Unreal for a long time, and I was there just recently, and the process is fairly standard, or you guys make up or develop your own process for building a project like this each time? I know that because they've been building games in Unreal for a good amount of time. Do you inherit process from?
So it's a little of both.
Or, yeah.
A lot of it is like you do get taught good practices. Like we used Scrum to organize our work. We were organized in sprints. We did retrospectives. We did our sprint planning, and all that. But we also did stuff of our own volition. For example, we were using Jira to track tasks to start with, and Jira's great for engineers. Not so much for artists. It's just, it's an ugly spreadsheet. So for artists, the development director is like, okay, if this doesn't work for you, rather than trying to make you fit Jira, we're going to find something that fits you. And we got them a physical Kanban board. And he, the development director would manage the conversion from Kanban to our Jira layout. But that was something that worked for them and improved their process, and also gave us better feedback on what was going on with the art side of things.
Right, and there's multiple teams because Faya is a pretty sizable group of people there. And so you've had Malediction there, but you also had other teams working on other game projects. So would you
Correct.
say that there are a variety of different methodologies trying to accomplish, because what you're showing us are your iterations of trying to get the game mechanics to work.
Sure.
And you had other teams working on other um, things, and were they doing things completely different, or had they learned in other ways? Because I know you've got a whole team of faculty, and they're not prescribing how you achieve things. They're advising in many
Correct.
cases. They're teaching you things, but you're also a fairly mature group of developers and students at FIA. University of Central Florida is one of the largest academic institutions in the country. A huge, huge population of students, and then you have an undergraduate program that also has a game group there. So, but you guys are thrown into this beautiful facility, which I think is fairly new, and there's large desks and pods
Yeah.
and war rooms of students. So you've got other teams over here doing things their way, and your team doing things, and I think it's fairly similar at Guildhall and USC and many institutions. So I guess the interesting thing and the kind of the question is that at this point, are you all figuring it out and benefiting from other groups and saying, well, let's benefit from it, or are you kind of carving your way? Because one thing that I know from development and studios is that many times you throw out the baby with the bathwater and you kind of start again. And
hmm
sometimes you learn some stuff and sometimes you don't, and you start again. And there's many studios that complain from the same lack of carry through, and some are very good at carrying over their best practices. And I'm kind of curious how much you guys benefited from the teams next to you, to the right and
Sure.
left. Yeah,
So the going back to the Kanban board, what are the other teams? There were 3 other teams creating games at the same time, each of about 15, 16 people in size. They had Kanban pretty much from the get-go. So that's where my development director got the ideas of, hey, you know what? That seems to be working for the artists of their team. Let's try using it for ours. So yeah, we got to see other teams put stuff into practice and learn, get lessons learned from them, and they learn from us.
sure.
We made it a practice to talk to each other and say, and just keep up with what's going on with other teams, and
Yeah.
any obstacles that we may have come across and how we dealt with them. And
The reason I asked the question is because once again, I watched a lot of footage of this game, and the play is really fun and the mechanics are really fun. And you can sort of see that people enjoy the combination of gameplay, environment art, design, and all these things don't come together by accident in my experience. They come together through testing, they come together through good choices, they come together through effective teams. And most of those things, every once in a while it's luck, but most of the time it's good iteration, good practice, good collaboration, and a lot of things that come together. Sometimes it's good leadership, and sometimes it's things that are well taught in academic institutions. And
yeah,
one of the things that we have here is, USC, we've got Guildhall, we've got FIA. These are, and we had um, DigiPen, and we had Ringling, all very good programs. And so in all amazing outcomes and great games. So it's great to see that you've got these projects that turn out to be fun and really well designed and really engaging, and these products that turn out to be, in many cases, and I think one of the reasons to have a stream like this is that you could see these games released, and they are in many cases on Steam, and could be released anywhere, right? And so it's not luck in many cases. It's good execution. So the question, and I think a good thing to convey to this audience is, it's not luck. It's
no,
work.
it's not luck at all. um, one thing that was very important for us early on was to delineate responsibility for different aspects of the game. Um, and sometimes it's pretty clear who's responsible for what. Like a gameplay mechanic, that's engineers. But art and design is a little trickier sometimes. And there was a point where there was a little muddy water between the two teams where they both felt that they had domain over the character, because the artists are the ones responsible for how the character looks, but design was like, well, we're the ones that design the story and all that behind the character. So it was basically coming to getting the two groups together and making it clear who is exactly responsible for what and who has final say. And once you get that settled, and this isn't to say that other teams can't contribute, because we had engineers helping us with gameplay puzzles, but more that once design has made a decision on something that's design related, the other teams are supposed to support it. Once the engineers have said no, we can't do that, design can't keep trying to push that particular aspect. Once design says we want a spooky Halloween environment, we can't go
Right.
high gothic, or that kind of thing.
You know where else that works really well? When you're cooking, right? If you're making a lasagna and that lasagna's got to get into the oven by 4 o'clock in order to serve by 5 o'clock, it better not get in there at 4:30. You're not serving lasagna at
Right.
5 o'clock, right? And for those of you who've taken my class before, I've used that example quite a bit. So you have to design it, and you have to, and sometimes it's just got to be in the oven long enough, and you have to decide what you're making, and you have to get it in the oven, right?
Right. And it doesn't help to have uncertainty.
That's right.
But we developed a good culture of respect. Everybody on the team respected each other's disciplines, and whenever somebody gave input from their discipline, it was taken seriously. So that was something we definitely learned from other teams, because not everybody gets along all the time, and you try to avoid as issues as possible by streamlining. I mean, that's basically what my role is, project lead. How can I make it so that people have what they need and have as few obstacles as possible, including each other?
Good stuff.
We had a few questions come in from chat as well. Let me.
Sure.
How did you navigate matching VFX with the aesthetic of the overall game?
Matching VFX with the well, we had a technical artist who was all about VFX. So I'm not much of an artist myself, so I can't go too into the details. But we knew we had a certain palette that we were going for. You'll notice that telekinesis was purple. There's a lot of purple in the game. Time control magic is blue. We also have a lot of blue in the game. So we had a strong art direction and an art guide from the very beginning, so we know what would contribute to that aesthetic that we were going for.
And then did you have any problems fitting? So what was like gameplay mechanics and need to be more informational with the player, and what was entirely aesthetic? Did you apply any particular way to sort of look at that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Oh, the question was, since you had a lot of blue, that was time mechanics, and a lot of purple, that was the telekinesis mechanics, and you also wanted to apply sort of similar color or concepts or themes to the game in general. Did you have any approach towards making sure that, like, hey, this is a gameplay mechanic, the player needs to be aware of what's going on, and we're using the color to inform him of that, and then how do you sort of match that with the general aesthetic that sounds like it was at least the design from the beginning was supposed to be fairly similar to these mechanics.
Right. So for that, we particularly for the time, because that's a little less intuitive than telekinesis. For telekinesis, if it's on the ground and you can push it, it can be pushed. But for telekinesis, for time control, we understood that was going to be a little harder to understand what you could and could not work. What would and would not be affected by that. So we used the cursor to highlight anything you could interact with. We had a blue outline over objects that would also be affected by time. And once it was being affected by time, we applied a material over it to let you know that it was being affected by time control powers. And they're all color coordinated so that there wasn't any confusion about what was happening to that object. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. That was sort of, how do you inform this player when you're trying to match the aesthetic? There's a lot that goes into that, right? Just picking your favorite colors and then also having them as the sort of the VFX for the abilities of the player, and then outlines. Did you approach? Did you think of accessibility in terms of like colorblind, people who are colorblind, or did you approach the game with any of those ideas in mind?
So we did not. We did have subtitles, but that's about the extent. Given the short time frame from December to August was the official end deadline, we didn't feel we could create the game that we wanted to make as well as fit all that in.
Yeah, it's tough. You're also getting grades on this, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as part of the program, we have monthly milestones that we need to hit with certain objectives. So it's a lot of work trying to do all of that on top of classes.
Another question came in from chat was, what was an important lesson you learned in regards to managing / leading a project across multiple different specializations, art, programming, design, etc.?
So a good lesson is trust your leads, because they know their discipline better than you do. I'm more technically inclined, so I understand the engineering parts a little better. But I still trusted my programming lead when he said we can or can't do something or how much time it would take. For my art lead, if she said that's not viable in that time frame, that was it. Took her word for it. I didn't argue the point. I would discuss with her, okay, what are alternatives? What can we do? But yeah, you've got people who you're working with who know more about who are subject matter experts. Listen to their advice.
That's a good piece of advice. All right, Lewis, did you have any more questions for Jaime?
No, I think somebody said that you probably make a pretty good lasagna.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll get back to you at the end here. We have some more general questions for all of you. If we have some time, which I think we just might barely. But last but not least, we're gonna move over to Milo, who will be presenting Ginkgo for us. You good with me? Go ahead and play the trailer.
Sounds great.
All right, let's go. Such a cool trailer.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right. Did you want to do something before I start playing the playthrough?
Actually, we can just go right into it, and then I can start talking about the game over it, if that's all right.
Yes. Let me go ahead and make sure that I start my screen share with you. All right. You can see that, right?
Yes, I'm in. Awesome. Yeah, so Like a few of the other games we've seen before, Ginkgo was an advanced games project at USC, which means that it was like a capstone project for a class, and we got to get like regular faculty feedback and assemble a student team to develop the game over like the course of 1 year, with the goal of like producing just like a really highly polished 15 to 20-minute demo at the very end of it. The original idea for the game was made by the creative director and lead designer Joey Tan and Justin Liu. Both of them are like really experienced game players and also game developers, and they wanted to sort of create a mechanic that they'd never seen before in a game. And what they came up with was this really innovative needle and thread system that allowed you to like sew and unsew parts of the world together and interact with it in a really unique way. From there, they created a prototype that sort of showcased like a vertical slice of everything they could do with the needle. And once it got greenlit as like a capstone project, that's when I was recruited on the team as lead producer and lead writer. And from there, we went into development, working a little bit of pre-production the summer before the school year, and then most of production from like 2019 to 2020, and then a little bit in the summer after, just for like final bug crushing and publishing to Steam and Itch. Sorry, just 1 second. My cat is crying to be let out of my room. Sorry, I know he'll get louder if I do not let him out. But yeah, the idea around this mechanic was we also wanted to like have a really close connection between this mechanic and also the story of our game, just because we thought like a needle and thread were so compelling in the way they convey like the mending and like destruction of relationships. So the main story of the game is about this young woman who is at her estranged mother's funeral, and she gets the opportunity to reconnect with her by going into this really crazy dream world that we're seeing right now that shows her life from like her mother's perspective, who was a really just like work-driven seamstress who came from maybe not the most exciting upbringings and just really wanted to provide a good life for her daughter, but in doing such sort of hurt their relationship by how much she worked and really not putting enough time into the relationship. And now after her mother's untimely death, you get to see sort of like everything that your mother actually did and the backstory behind everything she was working towards that you couldn't see as a child. Another huge part that we wanted to incorporate into Ginkgo is Joey and Justin are huge fans of horror and are not easily scared, and we wanted to really convey like Asian horror specifically through both the visuals and story of Ginkgo, which includes like being really atmospheric with your horror instead of like, I don't know, Western horror focuses a lot on like having jump scares, really like bombastic and gory moments. And for Asian horror, we wanted to focus on more subtle and atmospheric horror that built like a sense of unsettlement and fear throughout, with just like a few really well placed, really intense scares so that those beats could really like land. We took a lot of inspiration from Asian horror movies such as Audition, The Wailing, and even In the Mood for Love by Wong Kar-wai in terms of like having really highly saturated and cinematic visuals for the game itself. We also took a lot of inspiration from the first horror film, which was a German, I think, black and white film called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which had just like a lot of really crazy, angular and distorted architecture. That's why you see like all of the walls in Ginkgo have these really crazy like angles that hold the screens together. And we really tried to emphasize that regularity throughout the game to really bring our atmosphere together. If you see the stitching on this cloth right now, an interesting fact is it's not an animation that sews the cloth together, but we used Unreal's blueprinting to do 3D math in order to create those sewable points and make it look like the cloth is actually stitching in real time. So every time you stitch or like break apart something, no animations, it's just like all math and a little bit of cloth physics to make it feel realistic. And when we were designing puzzles for Ginkgo, it was pretty easy because we had just this central mechanic that we wanted to base everything around. So we did concentric design and just designing all of the verbs and actions and like layers of the game, from the puzzles to like all the different little weird monsters you're seeing around like how you can interact with them with the needle. So here you'll see sort of like a sail puzzle where you need to sew a sail together that will move a platform for you, propelled by a gust of winds later in the room. And then if you you can either choose to sprint across this bridge that's rotating towards you, or if you cut the sail again at the correct time, it will sort of like stop the bridge, and then suddenly you have a platform to walk across. I'm sure you've noticed by now that we have subtitles in the game, as well as like just a few like noises from the player character, as opposed to fully voiced lines. This was an intentional decision we made because it was a single player game and we only had one character, like one character who's there. We didn't want you to get tired of like hearing her voice over and over again, especially since we were trying to tutorialize the game's story and mechanics really diegetically. Like, we just didn't want you to hear like, I think I can sew that fire and that lantern together, or like, what would happen if I sewed these two cloths instead of these two? Like, we just wanted to convey it through subtitles and just like player noises to initiate tone, to make it feel like you were the player character, as opposed to it was like a conduit that you were experiencing. This part of the game is one of my favorite parts of the game. I think it's so exciting and like compelling. Our audio designer, Kevin Key, really went like crazy with the Chase Yokai's noises, and our composer, Anthony Sabatino, I feel like he just had like such a perfect composition for this area. It still scares me to play. When we shifted to remote work and I had to do like remote play testing to tune the sequence, I, as the producer, was the one who had to like fill that role and sort of play test it and help everyone out. And I was like, please don't make me do this. I'm so scared. It is so stressful every single time. And like even watching this, I can feel like my heartbeat going up a little bit. We took a lot of like inspiration from Outlast and the later Resident Evil games, especially for this part, in terms of like conveying a really frantic and like terrifying sequence in which you're not really able to fight back against the monsters that are chasing you, but rather you have to use the environment around you and like your materials at your disposal to craft situations that will help you escape. Here right now, like I said, this backstory is about like seeing your life from your mother's perspective. So this is your childhood room, but now with a different perspective, as you're like coming back to it older, you can see everything that your mom did to like provide for you, all the toys that she like created for you, as well as all of the work that she was doing even when she was at home. And once again, this part felt like very special and tender for me, especially just because it's like quite literally mending a relationship by sewing the two dolls' hands together. I felt like that was just like a beat that really conveyed what we were going for in terms of both story and gameplay. And so if it had been a little more subtle before, maybe it had become more overt now. Yeah, once again, we were working with puzzles that like we wanted in this room with this puzzle specifically to work a lot with verticality and different levels, as well as just like creating interesting puzzles that required the player to really see like the space they were in. It wasn't like they were just running through with this needle and thread sewing anything or like whatever. We wanted them to be able to intuitively figure out from the environment like which specific places they needed to sew and like how that would work. We did get a lot of bugs for a really long time where you were just able to sew anything to anything, which created a lot of interesting and unfortunate situations with our playtesters. I remember there was once a bug where you could just like sew the walls with the needle and people would like create little designs or like little smiley faces, like that fancy cursive S that everyone used to draw in elementary school on their papers. That was really, we I think had to remove a lot of colliders and do a lot of different play with colliders in order to make that work. In this part, we're once again seeing that monster that was chasing you before, but we wanted a different setup that gave the player a lot more agency. So instead of like running away from the monster, the idea here is you have to stealth around it in a central area by using different parts of your environment, both to obscure yourself visually, but also audio-wise, because the monster was designed through Unreal blueprinting to be able to both see and hear you in a certain radius. And then in this part, we wanted to give you like a feeling of finally triumphing over it by cutting this like guillotine and sort of blocking it off from you. I also wanted to mention each of the levels you've been seeing so far in Ginkgo All of them had custom event systems that we blueprinted in Unreal. Joey was responsible for like this entire room and coding and blueprinting all of it. I still don't know how she did it. It's like absolute wizardry to me. But each part has like its own code and its own custom code, which brought its own challenges, I would say, just because it wasn't like there are a few scripts we could report back to and like check in different rooms to see what was breaking. It was like we would have to go into different custom event systems and just see what was up. This particular platform gave us a lot of grief. I'm very glad it works in this video because I would say from like March to May, it was maybe like a 1 in 3 chance that it would actually connect and you'd be able to cut it. We put so much work on, especially into like how these cloth platforms felt to sew and just connect together to make it really satisfying and snappy. Like we wanted it to feel like you had to use a lot of precision and aim to sew with the needle, but at the same time, like we didn't want it to feel too difficult, and we wanted you to be able to do this really fast, like flicking mouse motion that just like felt like sewing in real life and translates really smoothly to gameplay. Something we also experimented with was putting a few different secret rooms throughout the game. So it was like you have a general vibe of the story if you just played the game normally, but if you really committed the time to look in each environment and recognize where something is like a miss, like this secret room, you would be able to do sort of a deeper dive into your mother's backstory and see like the dark underbelly beneath it. I won't reveal everything just because, I don't know, if you want to play the game yourself, you can see it for yourself. But there are 3 secret rooms throughout Ginkgo that'll actually give you like the full backstory of what happened to your mother, what happened with this monster, and like why she never reached out to you before she died. What we were really inspired by Asian horror's way of being very deliberate with its story, but in a way that made it still exciting because they would make everything like absolutely bonkers crazy in terms of like what happens and like twists and everything that could change, and we tried to incorporate as much of that like craziness into our story as possible. And so as you can see, this is sort of like the final portion of the game. It's like your mother's like grandest workshop, and it's theoretically where you would get like all the answers to everything you've been seeing all game. Like, why has your mother's ghost been appearing for you throughout this dream world, but she doesn't stop for you to have like a conversation? And then finally, she's like waiting here for you to talk, and then like the experience ends. Because unfortunately, scope is only so much. And yeah, it was a pretty big team that we worked with. I think we had 23 people at our peak. It was a very fun experience. That was probably my favorite part about Ginkgo, was getting to work with like such talented and passionate people. I think they were really what made this game like so special for me. Is it just felt like we were always like on the same page, and we all had like the same vision and passion for what we wanted to create in this experience that made a lot of issues, especially when we had to shift to remote work very suddenly in March. It made a lot of that translation much easier.
It's super cool. I love the original Soul mechanic and how you're able to you tied it all together, right? It's with the entire story, the level design, as well as the main mechanic of how you solve puzzles. So it's very impressive.
Holy camole.
That's another way to put it, yeah.
So are you guys, I know that, I guess in the last year or so, USC is kind of combined Viterbi and the USC Film School. Which were you guys part of one or the other originally, or are you the film school, or which group were you in originally, or?
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting, actually. So our creative director, Joey, she was an IMGD major and part of the film school, but I would say our team split about 50-50 in terms of like film school students and Viterbi engineering students. So we had like a lot of computer science games folks on the team, not only in programming roles, but also in like technical art, and even like just like pure art, helping us out with that, which was really helpful and very cool. Yeah,
that makes sense, because it's very technical, this project, and you achieved a lot. But also, you know, as you look through that environment, a lot of the space looks fairly unique. In other words, there's not a lot of apparent modularity, even though it's clear that you have to, because I don't know if you did or didn't, but There doesn't seem to be a tremendous amount of opportunity for modularity, though I can imagine that you have to use modularity to generate that scale of environment.
Mhm.
Mostly
Yeah,
because of patterns on the walls, right? Like that's not like Lego environment space. I don't know. Do you have much insight into how it was assembled?
yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, our team was like very cool, very very skilled, lots of absolute badasses, which made which made us like able to go really far with what we wanted in terms of our art scope. But as you saw, like those walls were part of a modular building set that we created. We also had a different tile set for like wooden walls and floors that we could just like use and apply to different areas of the game depending on what we needed. We also had the really unique opportunity to collaborate with some folks from Art Center. We had two really great art directors, Andrea Zhang and Nolan Liu, who like helped us establish a really clear visual style and like exactly what we wanted from the very beginning. They were able to like really convey what we wanted in terms of our vision to all of our artists, and were really helpful with like doing paint overs and iterations to make things like match the style. Something that really helped us a lot is using Substance Painter. Interestingly enough, not a lot of our textures are like hand painted or hand done, but rather we modeled them in Maya, exported them to Substance Painter. I'm pretty sure every
Oh, that was
Bummer.
really bad timing, but I think
did I disconnect there for a second?
yes, just for a second, but you're back now.
Okay, cool. I don't know where I left off, but basically, yeah, our artist would model everything in Maya, export it to Substance Painter, and I'm pretty sure every asset in the game was in some way textured by Joey, which is crazy now that I am saying it, but she made it seem like not a very big deal at the time. But yeah, that was part of what helped us get like so much unique art into the game. And interestingly enough, like a lot of props are reused in like really subtle or overt ways, like that the Chase Yokai skeleton appears in a few different areas, but it's the same model, just like broken down into different segments and then retextured to seem like a little unique. So there are a lot of little shortcuts we were able to take throughout the
So,
art process.
someone was curious, what lighting techniques did you use to add to the atmosphere?
Oh, so well, we just used, I think, Unreal's internal lighting for it, but what we went for was just like really high saturation, compelling lights. It was a huge pain to optimize and very, very difficult.
Yeah, it looked like even the little the rings that you sewed together, it almost looked like they had a light on them as well.
Yeah, that was, we worked really hard on having a really intuitive UI system that made it easy to see like what was sewable and what wasn't sewable. So what we went for was like little sewable points that would interact like dynamically, whether you were hovering on them or like pointing at them or not, or if you had the needle out and were like pointing in a general direction. We wanted you to be able to see everything you could sew and then have to put together in your head, sort of like a math problem, all of the possibilities.
See, you had another question that came in and a comment. I love how this game has so many architectural space interactions, I think. Could you tell us more about how you put together the environment? I think you've touched a little bit about it, but I guess they're curious to know more.
Of course, yeah. I think something that really helped with how we interacted with the environment is all of our designers have like a very deep visual background. So they were able to like factor the environment into all of their designs, as well as like it was pretty easy for them to like model what they meant if they were having trouble conveying an idea. I would say like Justin Liu, especially our lead designer, was really curious to how we could use the cloth and sort of incorporate it naturally into our environment. He came up with the idea of like a hook system that we could sew cloth pieces and into different shapes with, which you saw like the triangle shape that we sewed in the sail puzzle in like the earlier room, as well as all of the cloth that you could sew like over windows in the Chase Yokai's maze to sort of obscure yourself from its view. So just like I think thinking about all the other parts of the project, even though you have like one specific focus on it, was something that like really helps your ideas become more incorporated with everything else.
What is the another question from chat? What is the thought process behind the way the rooms and levels are designed? Are they set in a particular way to drive the atmospheric horrific mood?
So the way the rooms were set up was each one, I would say, is meant to convey either like a different emotional vibe, a different mechanic, or like a different message from the story, sometimes a couple at once. Like in the very beginning of the game, you start in your mother's like old rundown workshop and you kind of see like where she began, and that sort of is what sets the story off while you're learning the basic mechanics of the game. Then we have like the initial sequence with the monster where you're just chased through this maze and you're meant to feel like fear and helplessness and like have to use these mechanics that you learned first in like a very slow paced environment, now in a really quick one, and then progressing that in terms of mastery and story later in the game when we get to like the maze that you have to outsmart the chase yokai in, with once again with these mechanics, but also adding in that layer of, oh, it can't see me and it can't hear me as I like open these doors and progress forwards, and like deepening the story in terms of changing feelings towards your mother and seeing like new perspectives, as well as this dark undercurrent that you found within the secret rooms.
I'm kind of curious. So I'm kind of curious how Ginkgo was received internally at USC. I mean, it has a fairly rich history of, um, established game design, but also, a fairly rich history of Asian, game designs. I guess I don't know, history or whatever. How was it received internally at USC? Because having had a long pedigree of being known for game design.
It was received really positively. I was actually really pleasantly surprised. All of the USC faculty were like really big fans of it, and they were really huge fans of like the progress we were able to make in between each internal deadline that we had throughout the year. They were just, I guess, like they'd never seen like a mechanic like this before, and they were just really curious to see what we would be doing with it and if we would be utilizing it to its full potential. And I think they were like really happy with what we produced. I think a lot of what helped that is a lot of us had a really personal connection to this game, as like most of us were like Asian or Asian American developers working on it, who had joined it because it was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a game before that's specifically focusing on Asian horror and Asian themes, especially this theme of like a difficult parent-child relationship that could have been caused by like just like generational differences and diaspora. I think helped a lot as well.
I think it makes it very unique and kind of it's familiar, but it's familiar in the way that like the Miyazawa films are. It's kind of, I can associate with it, but I'm not sure why. It's delicious, but it's a different flavor. Delicious,
Thank you. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, we were going for like just a little bit of familiarity, like enough to ground yourself, but not enough to feel safe or comfortable. So I'm so glad to hear you say that.
We are coming up a little bit short on time here. Milo, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Nothing else I can think of. Just that everyone worked really hard on this game. It's out right now on Steam and itch, so feel free to go download it for free. Yeah.
Awesome. Before we did plan to sort of talk a little bit about in general about going to college and going through all these programs and working with all these people and people that you didn't know before, and now you're supposed to work on projects together. But due to time, I think I'm going to give Lewis a chance to ask a question as well. But one of the questions that I was curious about was, for each one of you can answer it. What are your plans for the future? We can start with Alethea.
Yeah, so I am currently in the process of starting my own studio with my another graduate from Guildhall and my spouse, actually. So we got an investor to do about a year's worth of funding, and we actually just started building our first prototype in Unreal. So we've been working on a kind of a spooky house themed game with a more traditional demon monster type thing. It seems that I have a preference of projects.
Super cool. It's not a small undertaking. I can tell you that from experience. What about you, Hami?
I'm currently in Texas working as a mobile client engineer for Play Studios.
So you got hired?
Yeah.
Yeah, just like that, easy. What about you, Milo?
Yeah, I'm a senior graduating in December right now. Currently looking for work as like both in production and writing roles. So I guess it was like cool to show off Ginkgo. In terms of the game itself, I know all of us would like love to come back to it and develop it further, but almost all of us are like have already graduated and are like working right now, and just developing the game on the same pace that we wanted before, I don't think would be feasible until at least a few years down the line.
It's always cool to sit on, good mechanics and ideas, and
Mhm.
when the time's right, be able to go back to them, which is why source control and good commentary on your code pipelines of how you get assets in there is very important, because the amount of times I've found myself reopening a project or just out of the blue getting really excited about something I did like years ago and jumping in there and realizing that I have no idea what I did because I didn't put any comments in it because it was just a little prototype, right? And so, yeah, just nice little tip, I guess. I'm trying to leave with everyone. Lewis, did you have something you wanted to ask before we round this out?
Yeah, I think these are amazing projects. I've been familiar with these projects for some time, and as I think we've talked about, you don't accidentally make projects at this level of polish and this level of finish. You all worked very hard to get these where they are. I think we're all very delighted to see them in Unreal Engine, and hopefully it was very helpful in getting them to where they got. And you also represent, I think, amazing schools, and maybe you have just a couple of words, of advice for students about how to get projects to the level of polish that you got yours, how to even some words about the programs that you attended, or just there's people watching this or may watch it later on YouTube or whatever that could use some advice. What would you have to say or add?
We can start with Alethea again. Let's go through the same order.
Alrighty. So I would say for projects, scoping yourself is definitely the number one way, in my opinion, that you're going to get a high level of polish, is building in that time, and it's more time than you're going to build in initially, which I think is me sliding into producer mode a bit of your risks are going to be bigger than you think they are, and it's going to take more time. And if you have a united kind of vision and you can keep yourself down to what that is, and I know like sometimes the next great idea pops up, but you have to kind of put that in your shelf for later because it doesn't fit this game. You just don't have the time to build it. And really just sticking with it, because I know it's really easy to be like, but I have this cool idea and it's a lot more fun than polishing this thing I've been working on for weeks. So staying in that, and I would say that kind of goes across the entire program. I know one of the advices my professor given me was like, it doesn't matter if it's perfect, get it in. And just like she pointed out, she's like, you're that person who wants to sit and fiddle and polish on it, and you never want to be done with it, but you have to be willing just to submit it and get that feedback, because it's the only way you're really going to improve, especially in a kind of really intensive program. So that would be my best.
It's a good tip. Yeah, it's really easy to almost like fall in love with what you're working on, and it's your baby, and it can never be as good as you think it can be, right? And you just keep iterating. And sometimes you work on something for months and you realize that the first prototype felt better. It happens. Jaime.
So I just found out that some of my teammates are watching this stream. What's up, Beagles? So advice that I would give is 2 points. As for the project lead, one of your tools is an axe. You are going to have to cut stuff left and right so you can make schedule. Do not be afraid to use it. use it early rather than having the work go to waste because you decided to cut too late. And the second point, which like our team got along really well, but even with a team that gets along very well, sometimes people don't meet expectations, and that means you're going to have difficult conversations that you need to have. Don't put those off hoping that they'll resolve themselves. Take care of them early, that way they don't turn into something bigger and cause bigger problems later down the line.
I wouldn't have known. That's the kind of stuff you learn from experience, right? I'm sure you found yourself in a situation, or maybe you were just off the top of your head, you just knew I'm the guy with the axe.
Yeah, I like to. I remember talking about even making the games that I worked on, the must-haves, should-haves, like-to-haves, and to make sure that you work really hard to get the must-haves in, and then get the should-haves in, and then the like-to-haves, but make sure that whatever features are in the must-haves get in the must-haves. Because if you're fighting for the like-to-haves or should-haves, then sometimes you don't get the must-haves done.
And it's not easy to decide what goes where, because something that seems like it should be a must-have is actually would be nice to have.
Right.
It takes some honesty with not only yourself but with the rest of the team to decide, do we really need this feature?
Mm-hmm.
Super good information. Milo.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything everyone said. I guess my advice is like very related. It's like a very good piece of advice I got sometime in the past couple years, which is that we're making games, like not saving lives. So like when it comes down to it, like you should value yourself over what you're making. Most games that are being developed on like a student or like personal level, like are being developed in a relatively low stakes environment, and like that means that you can give yourself time to like rest and fail and just like take time for yourself when it's 2 a.m. and you've been looking at the same script for like 6.5 hours. Like maybe it's time to go to sleep instead of like chugging away on it. Like some of my favorite parts on Ginkgo weren't even the parts where we were working. It was just like hanging out with my team in that like dedicated space. Like we all had this time when we went like ice skating together, which was like very fun. I would say like just focus on, I would say, preserving yourself at the same time, like while creating this game. Unless your game is about saving lives, then or like literally save lives, that would be very interesting, and I would love to hear more about games that save people.
I don't know if they're games, but there are plenty of use cases where Unreal is being used to produce medical simulators. So virtual surgery using VR, and also just for being able to visualize, the anatomy of the body and your organs in 3D, right? In a safe manner. I would much rather, I think, try to do surgery on a kidney virtually before I ever try to do that on a real person. And so there are opportunities where, I said we don't get to, is that there are opportunities where Unreal is being used to save lives, which is pretty cool. Awesome. I want to thank you all so much for taking this time. I know that you all have jobs and other various projects that you're working on. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge from the early stages of your career to the world. Thanks, Lewis, for coming on, and especially to Kate Baird and Mary Dvorsky as well for coming on the stream. Please stick around for the call. Don't jump out just yet. We just want to wrap it up once we're done. But for all you out there who has been with us either from the beginning or later, hope you had a good time learning from all of these students and hearing a little bit about their journeys. If you want to see more of our live streams, make sure you hit that follow button on our Twitch page so you can see when we go live. Lewis, is there a stream tomorrow?
There is a stream tomorrow. It is somewhat of a follow-up on today's stream. It's we have 3 educators from separate academic institutions. We've got Sue-Ann Fu coming from Savannah College of Art and Design, and we've got Seth Holiday from Brigham Young University, and we also have Neil from Hertfordshire and the University from the UK, who will be joining us. And these are amazing institutions that are represented here in today's stream. So tomorrow we're going to be following up with some of the instructors that have helped form programs very similar to these and talk about how they teach their students. So yeah, it should be really good. We'll be talking about some of the same things, how they build their programs, how they get their students into Unreal, and should be good.
Awesome. And then
It starts at 2:00 Eastern time. And I'll also be joined by Mark Flanagan, and please join us then.
And then next week we have Aaron Sims Creative is going to come on to talk about filmmaking using Unreal Engine. And if you don't know who Aaron Sims and his team are, what they produced, just go to ArtStation, put in Aaron Sims, take a look at some of the characters, models, and other stuff that they're working on. It's very, very, very impressive. As always, make sure you let us know what you're working on. Forums is a good place. Unreal Slackers, our unofficial community Discord. It's a great place to find people, meetups, game jams, and just talk about Unreal in general. There's a lounge. It's kind of funny. Will Chambers just started streaming a couple days of the week here in the VoIP channel. You can just jump in there and talk to other devs. It's a great place. Twitter as well. Make sure you put those projects in on our screenshot Saturday. We love seeing everything that you're working on. And it also helps us to find cool projects that we can spotlight on the live stream and also the launcher. I think with that said, it is time to wrap up. Once again, thank you so much to all of you. I hope all of you out there are staying safe during these troublesome times, I guess we can put it lightly, and that you are enjoying all the content that we're able to put together for you. And so with that said, let's all wave goodbye and take care, and we'll see you all again next week, and some of you tomorrow. Bye, everyone.
Yep.